Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am Kris. This, little different. This is Timur and the Timurid Empire. I just did Ottoman series, episode 10, and they had the battle, was it Ankara? And they just had him in there, and I didn't know anything about Timur. And then I looked it up, and I saw that the People Profiles did a video on him 8 days ago. So I thought, I'm definitely going to check that out. If you can click that thumbs up, helps me out. Subscribe to the channel if you like the content, and click on the thanks button, donate to the channel if you'd like. Now, I am running low on time, so this is going to have to be 4 videos at about 16 and a half, it's almost 17 minutes. I normally might do like 3 videos, but I just don't have enough time. I've got to be out of here at 6. So and with the talking, I just don't have the time. So let's get into it.
It is the 17th of March 1401, a day that will live in infamy in Syrian history. A massive
All right, sorry about that. I had a phone call.
army is arrayed before the great city of Damascus, which has been under siege for several months. Despite promises by the commander of the enemy army that he will spare the city's inhabitants if they surrender, his forces lay waste to all before them, burning everything in sight, enslaving and killing tens of thousands, and even destroying the city's ancient Umayyad mosque. 20 years later, people can still see the devastation caused to Damascus, and yet this is just one of the many acts of devastation inflicted on peoples and cities from the Levant to India by the fearsome ruler of a vast new empire that dominates Asia. His name? Timur, founder of the Timurid Empire. The man known to history as Timur was the founder and first ruler of the Timurid Empire, and according to the chronicles of his life, written much later, was born on the 9th of April 1336 near a town which was then called Kesh in Central Asia, but which is now known as Shahrazabs in the south of Uzbekistan. Today, a gigantic statue around 10 meters high of Timur stands in the center of Shahrazabs in honor of the city's most famous son. Some historians doubt the accuracy of this birth date and believe it is more likely that Timur was born several years earlier, perhaps even as early as 1328 or 1329. There is a strong argument that the 1336 date is close to the truth though, as Timur lived down to 1405 and was still able to engage in military campaigns right up to his death. Had he been born in 1329 or so, he would have still been campaigning in his mid-70s, which seems implausibly old. Timur means iron. A later legend attached itself to him that when he was born, there was an unusual amount of blood on the palms of the baby's hands, a sign that he would be responsible for shedding much blood in his lifetime. His father was Tarakhay, a minor aristocratic lord of the Baras clan, a tribe of Tatar or Turkic Mongol people in this part of Central Asia. Timur's mother is noted in the chronicles as being a woman called Tekina Khatun. Of her, virtually nothing is otherwise known. Indeed, as we will see shortly, Timur's youth and early life are shrouded in mystery. Timur's rise to power and the empire he would build was possible only because of immense changes which had occurred across Asia in the century and a half before he was born. For hundreds of years, going back to the 7th and 8th centuries, Turkish or Turkic groups like the Karluks, Kazakhs, Turkmen and Uzbeks had dominated much of Central Asia, the region between the Caspian Sea in the west and the Himalayas in the east. They had become the ruling powers here after migrating southwestwards from regions further to the north and east in Siberia and Mongolia. The Turks eventually adopted the Islamic faith of the Arabs, Persians and other groups like the Sogdians that they had encountered in Central Asia. Over time, they became more sedentary and less warlike. This also made them more vulnerable to attack from a subsequent wave of invaders from Mongolia. In the first years of the 13th century, a warlord there named Temujin, better known today as Genghis, united the Mongolian tribes under his leadership as Khan and began a series of relentless military campaigns that spread Mongol rule into Central Asia and beyond. The Barlas clan, to which Timur belonged, was one of the Mongolian clans which joined Genghis Khan's armies. Therefore, Timur's birth in the land of the Uzbeks in the middle of the 14th century was only possible because of the manner in which Genghis Khan united the Mongolian tribes and then waged war on the Turkic people of Central Asia, conquering them and establishing a wholly new Mongol ruling class in the region. Genghis's successors had continued to expand the empire he began building, and by the 1270s, Mongol rule extended from the edges of Poland in Europe to Korea in the Far East. The vast size of the Mongol Empire by then had made it unwieldy in an age when transmitting information and orders across such vast distances could take months or even years. As a result, the Mongol Empire began to splinter following the death of Mungke Khan in 1259. Eventually, 4 major Mongol states emerged. In the east, Kublai Khan would rule over Mongolia, China, and other lands like Korea. The Golden Horde was formed out of the lands in Eastern Europe, Russia, the Caucasus, and on the eastern side of the Caspian Sea in what is now Kazakhstan. Timur would one day clash with this state. More consequential in his early days were the Chagatai Khanate and the Ilk Khanate. The Ilk Khanate ruled over much of the northern half of the Middle East, the land of the Turkmen on the southeastern side of the Caspian Sea and what was then known as Persia, modern-day Iran. Timur was born within the lands of the Chagatai Khanate, which controlled lands around modern-day Uzbekistan, much of Afghanistan, and some adjoining lands east into part of western Mongolia. By the time Timur was born here, the situation had changed again. The Mongols, like the Turks before them hundreds of years earlier, had begun to intermarry with the Turkic peoples of Central Asia and adopt much of their culture. For instance, the Mongols were now living in cities and towns filled with Turkic architecture of a kind which was in turn indebted to Persian and Arab culture. Most importantly, the Mongols, who in Genghis's time had followed a religion which was animist and shamanist and prioritized the sky god Tengri, began to convert in large numbers to Islam in Central Asia. Therefore, while Timur was born into a Mongol tribe near Kesh and the Chagatai Khanate ruled the region, the reality was that the elite was now a hybrid Turkic-Mongol people that adhered to Islam and lived in cities and towns that owed quite a lot to the Turkic, Persian and Arab culture. The empire Timur would build would reflect this complex and fluid political, cultural and religious environment. There is very little known about Timur's early years, and what we apparently have information about, such as the date of his birth, is open to dispute, for the sources for Timur's life were all generally written well after the events they purport to describe, and they are in the form of chronicles and histories that are of dubious objectivity. There are no neutral administrative records that have survived to confirm the accuracy of the later accounts. Of these chronicles, the most valuable is the Zafarnama, meaning Book of Victories, written by the Persian scholar and historian Sharaf al-Din Ali Yazdi. It was written in the second half of the 1420s, between 20 and 25 years after Timur's death. Sharaf had grown up in the 1380s and 1390s himself, so he lived through many of the events he described, and also had access to documentation produced as part of Timurid rule, as well as being able to interview many figures who had known and served Timur. This being said,
I understand that, not knowing the what is happening there? Not knowing the exact date and all that stuff. Yeah, it's it'd be better if we knew, sure. But not knowing the date of birth doesn't take away from the accomplishments of that person's life. And maybe, just maybe, Timur didn't celebrate it like we do today. Maybe didn't even really know his own birthday. I don't know if that's true. I'm just saying it might not have been as important when you grow up in a time where conquering and fighting is your life, as opposed to today where hiccup, it's just not the same thing.
Zafarnama was commissioned by a grandson of Timur's, and it was panegyric, meaning it was written in such a way as to lionize Timur's life and reign. As such, it cannot be read uncritically as an objective account of Timur and his actions. It is more than balanced out by the highly critical Ajaib al-Maqdur fi Nawaib al-Timur, written by Ibn Arab Shah. This transliterates as the wonders of destiny of the ravages of Timur. Arab Shah was a child when Timur's armies sacked the city of Damascus in Syria where he lived. He was carried off to Samarkand as a slave and spent 20 years there, resulting in his account of Timur's life and deeds being understandably quite hostile. There are several other chronicles of Timur's life. All have to be handled with caution to get to the truth of the ruler they purport to describe. The chronicles are very quiet on the subject of Timur's childhood. We can imagine what his life was like as a part of a quasi-nomadic Turkic-Mongol tribe on the Asian steppe, rearing livestock that were the basis of sustenance and trade. Education centered for a boy like Timur on learning to fight on horseback. What the later accounts do suggest is that there were signs from a young age that Timur was destined for greatness. His grandmother was a seer who one night had a vision in her sleep that Timur would, quote, be lord of the stars and master of the kings of the age. Beyond these grandiose statements, written with the benefit of hindsight in knowing that he conquered much of Asia, there are virtually no specifics on his early life. Instead, the first concrete details that we have come from 1360, when he was already in his mid-20s or older. Timur's emergence at this time was closely connected to the decline of the Chagatai Khanate. In 1347, the ruler of the Khanate, Amir Kazan, was killed by a rival, Amir Kazakhan. This marked a shift in the power dynamics within the Khanate. Amir Kazakhan was never able to establish complete control over the geographically disparate Chagatai lands, and by the 1350s, there were effectively several regional rulers after forming their own small dominions throughout the Khanate. In 1358, Amir Kazakhan was assassinated, further destabilizing what remained of the Khanate. It was in this environment of political and military fragmentation that Timur shows up for the first time. In 1360, he allied with Tughluq Timur, the Khan of the tribes of Mongolia, who was trying to use the crisis to reassert direct Mongolian control over this part of Central Asia, a region also known as Transoxiana, as it straddles the Oxus River. Timur swore fidelity to Tughluq and campaigned with him for a time. Then he abandoned the alliance and formed a partnership with Amir Hussain, the ruler of the town of Balkh in northern Afghanistan. This was sealed with a marriage to Hussein's sister, Aljai. Thereafter, Timur and Hussein formed what was little more than a small band of raiders attacking locations around southern Uzbekistan and northern Afghanistan throughout the early 1360s. Timur even spent 2 months detained in a rat-infested cowshed after he was captured by a Mongol raiding party. Worse still was to follow for Timur. In 1363, after being released from captivity, he received the injury which resulted in the nickname by which he was long known to the world. While serving in a military party near Khorasan, on the Iranian plateau, he was struck by several arrows. One hit him in the shoulder, another in the leg, and another in the right hand. The missile that hit his hand removed his 2 smaller fingers. The most consequential injury, though, was to his right leg. The wound was deep, and his walk was permanently impaired thereafter. Even in his own time, Timur had become known as Timur the Lame, or Tamerlane. Apparently, Timur crawled to safety after the attack and was saved by some local shepherds. It was a formative moment, both because of the injury he suffered and because thereafter his ascent as a major warlord began, almost as though the attack and the damage it inflicted on him made him even more determined to establish a power base for himself in Transoxiana. Over the next 3 years, he and...
If you get a nickname where the lame is thrown on there, we understand why. But it couldn't have been thought of in his mind as a respectful thing. And that has, with the death and all the political situations that are happening, and there was just somebody looking for that power vacuum. He feels a little insulted. I'm just guessing, I don't know. But I'm going to say he feels a little insulted by that. Or maybe he used that as an excuse, like, oh, people think that I can't accomplish anything, which is that's probably a little more possible. I can't accomplish something because of my wounds. Well, we'll see. They will remember my name.
Hussein grew their strength and formed alliances with new groups across Transoxiana. Then, in 1366, they descended on the city of Samarkand, an ancient city in Central Asia that had been established as a capital of the Chagatai Khanate. The ruler that the Mongolians had imposed here some years earlier was killed, and Timur and Hussein established themselves as rulers over Samarkand and a substantial portion of the former Khanate. The conquest of Samarkand created a problem for Timur and Hussein. Previously, they were allies who had pooled their resources to acquire positions of power and wealth in Central Asia as the Chagatai Khanate collapsed. Now, a rivalry began to develop over who actually was in charge in Samarkand. Their growing antagonism towards one another eventually spilled over into open war. This was further complicated by the fact that in 1368, the Mongol Yuan dynasty that Kublai Khan had established in China a century earlier was overthrown by the Ming dynasty, sundering the landscape of Mongolian rule across Asia further again. This would destabilize the eastern frontiers of the former Chagatai Khanate lands even more, and would also have implications at the very end of Timur's long life and reign. By 1368, the conflict between Timur and Hussein in Central Asia had become one for control over a large part of Transoxiana. Timur emerged victorious from it in 1370 when he defeated and captured his former ally at his old base at Balkh. Timur ordered his execution and then declared himself as the new governor rather than ruler of the Chagatai Khanate and lord of the Fortunate Conjunction, an astrological title imbued with significance in Central Asia, which Mongol rulers had borne here for some time. Despite claiming to simply be a governor of the Chagatai Khanate, historians view these events in 1370 as marking the beginning of a new power in Central Asia, the Timurid Empire, or Empire of Timur.
Okay. The Empire of Timur. That's a great place to stop. This is part one. This is going to be a four-parter. So, we're getting into it. Well, I'm learning. I'm getting into it right now. All right, we're going to find out what happens. I have a feeling executions are kind of what he does too. I know about the burying people alive. I know he didn't do that to Bayezid, although Bayezid did eventually die. I think he was probably poisoned. I don't know. Anyways, this is part one. We're ending it here. We will be back with part two tomorrow, unless today is Friday as you see this, and then it'll be Monday. So until then, have a good day, have a good night.